കേക്കാം.
Okay, very good. So thank you so much for the introduction, and I appreciate everyone coming together. And I'm trying to speak in English. The reason for that is I hope that most of our young people coming from different parts of the world probably understand English better than Malayalam. But if that is an issue, you can certainly ask questions in whatever way, actually along the way or after the presentation, so that I can explain in Malayalam as well. അല്ലാതെ ഞാനൊരു ഇംഗ്ലീഷുകാരനായതുകൊണ്ടല്ല ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് സംസാരിക്കുന്നത്. പിള്ളേരെ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഇവന്റ് ആയതുകൊണ്ട് മാത്രം I'm actually trying to speak in English. So the topic that we have is how to be a Knanaya, right? And the reason why I thought I will do this is I am personally very, very proud to be a Knanaya. That's the reason I thought I'll take this topic and take everyone through what is Knanaya and why should we be proud about it. Because if you are not proud about it, if you don't have the pride of being a Knanaya, you will never try to live to the ideals of that community. That is the reason I thought it would be good to talk about that. Right? So before I actually start the conversation, I just want you to think for a minute. And what comes to your mind when you see this question? Why should we be proud to be a Knanaya? What's the first couple of things coming to your mind? I don't want you to tell me, but just keep that in your mind. What's coming to your mind when you say, why should we be proud to be a Knanaya? The reason is I did a poll of different people from different places, and some of you may be already in this meeting. So I tabulated a few things about what people told me comes to their mind the first time when they hear Knanaya. Why should I be proud about it? So the first group of people actually are Knanaya migrants. That means they grew up in Kerala, they migrated to different countries, Australia or America. So I'm not saying everything each person said because there is a lot of repetitions, but I just wanted to go through this. So unique culture, and we have unique songs. History and traditions, I'm proud about it. We are stand out in the crowd, one of a kind, right? We are royal blood, a unique identity, endogamy, the values like hospitality. We are very hospitable. We are very supportive of other community members. We support others. We are a unique tribe. Happy when we meet. That many of you can probably appreciate that at our events, and when we come together, we are extremely happy. And we do help each other. Actually, as Bishop said earlier, that's one of the things that we should be constantly thinking about in the current situation. And you can only be a Knanaya by birth only. And it's a fun-loving and a lively community. So at least some of you can probably relate to some of these statements. So this is actually the view of Knanaya immigrants who born in India, they were raised in India, and they actually moved to other countries for opportunities. So the next group of people, I actually got a few points from a few priests actually. Thank you for some, I don't know whether any of you actually here, but they said it's a pride of being a Knanaya. It's an age-old tradition. We actually really get, be proud about our traditions. We have strong faith-based, and that's one of our traditions, actually, as Bishop talked about. And we are united, and there is a oneness among us. When we hear Knanaya, there is a oneness. Again, hospitality came into the picture. We are affectionate, and we actually accept other people. We have great fellowship when we get together. Unique identity. Know by family name. That's a huge aspect for Knanaya community. We know each other. And how many people can actually claim that? And others appreciate us, means non-Knanaya people actually appreciate us. At the same time, they envy us. They want to be like us. And so some people actually have good words for us, and some people actually criticize us because they just don't know who we are, or they just feel like they cannot be the way that we are, right? So the next group of people are some middle school kids. I actually just went and asked some kids too, and middle school and high school kids. So in their view, they're proud because everyone is united. It's like a family, sense of belonging. I belong to something. Because in this current world, that's the hardest thing to see. Actually, we want to be, everyone bound to belong to something. So we are belonging to something. Knas loves to socialize, and they see that in our, either in churches or our association functions, when the family functions, they see this in real life, right? Lasted so many years to be proud. I thought that was pretty cool, right? For them to think about, okay, we survived centuries, and I'm very proud about it. Everyone knows each other somehow. Everyone knows. So that's because we actually often we have conversations at home. That's what they listen to. And as a function of that, what they said was there's no secret in Knanaya community, right? And they also think about the traditions of the community. And then I actually asked some young adults. They said this community has an opportunity to help each other, build a strong identity through education and wealth, and there is a common bond among the young adults. I'm talking about people actually in college. Then I asked about some adults in India, what they think about it. Again, pride comes to the top. It's a family feeling. It's a gift of God, they believe. And the other interesting thing from the Indian context, they were saying we are true to our forefathers, and by living the Knanaya ideals, we have the connection to our ancestors, which is a huge one, because we actually take pride in the fact that our ancestors continued the traditions and they actually kept this community as a unique one. And the other one, what was interesting was we are part of the first Christian, because our ancestors' migration happened in 300, and it is just 200 to 300 years after Jesus was born. So we were Christians probably before a lot of other people. And then we are a chosen people. That's because we have the roots in the Judeo-Christian, heritage. They believe actually we are a chosen people. And then another interesting terminology I heard was collective brotherhood that spread across the continent. I thought that was very interesting, because we actually come together. We are from all over the world, come together. The only thing that binds us is actually we are Knanayas. So that collective brotherhood that spread across continents that only we can claim. And finally, I also talked to a few Knanaya adults who are born and brought up in this country, in the US, and they married another Knanaya, and they also have kids now. They are about 30 years of age, for example. In their mind, brotherhood, feelings from within. One of the person wrote to me and said, words cannot describe the moment I hear the word Knanaya. It's a unique feeling, the unity. And they actually grew up through KCYL and other things. They say we have lifelong friendship, a common bond, camaraderie, a sense of belonging. Again, that's actually important, especially in the Western society. As our kids grow up, they become islands if they don't have anything to belong to. So that's a sense of belonging, a pride of passing traditions. That was an interesting one. Actually, one of the adults told me that every time they have a kid who is 2 years old, and their grandfather come home and teach them nada. So it is something that they can pass on to the next generation as a tradition. Nada is an example. Our Puravana Patwal is another example. There are all the rituals of wedding. All are examples of that. But there is something I can pass on to my next generation. I thought that was very powerful. And no one by family name. This is something actually we heard it before, that even kids or young people who grew up in this country actually can say that we know someone by family name. That's a value. And then finally, our endogamous nature. So when I want to stop here, and I just want to think about, isn't this what defines us as Knanaya? Isn't what we actually make us so proud about being a Knanaya? Set aside all the differences that we have, because we as a community, because we know each other, we are very tightly knitted. When you have such a community, naturally there will be conflict for various reasons. But underneath all of that conflict, there is something very common that unites all of us. And that's what makes us, I think we should be proud about being a Knanaya. And before I go to the next slide, I just wanted to tell you one example. When I first came to study in the US, I was in Oklahoma State University. Oklahoma is in the middle of America, very few Indians. There was one or two Knanaya people. So when I came to the US and went to the university, my uncle gave me a KCC and a directory. And he said, keep it with you. If you ever travel anywhere, you can always find someone who actually can help you if you need it. This is back in 1994. In 1994 December, I decided to travel with one of my Malayali friends. He's actually a Muslim, came to study in the same school. So we were planning to drive to Chicago to my uncle's place. So I took the directory and looked and see, is there any Knanaya lived between Oklahoma and Chicago? And I found one telephone number, one person who actually lives in a city called Kansas City, which is not directly in the route, but you can go that way too. It's almost in the middle. So I called that person and I said, I am so and so. And in the meantime, my uncle said that he knows him. And so I called him and I said, we are traveling that place. I would like to stop and meet with you. So I drove there. I went to his house and he said, stop for a coffee. We went there at 4 o'clock. We started talking and finally we stayed over in that house and we only left next day. That's when actually truly I started to think that he is not related to me. And he welcomed me at his home, and not only he welcomed, he convinced me to stay there overnight, and I actually left only the next day. And that's what's so good about being a Knanaya, that you belongs to something and people care for each other. As I said, on the surface, there could be a lot of issues, but underneath that, there is something unique about us, and it's only for us, right? So that's what make that we should be proud to be Knanaya. So then I actually put all those words together in a word cloud. As some of you who actually probably might have seen this, this is not an artificially made up. It's a program by which I get all the feedback that I got from these interviews I mentioned previously. It was an online question I sent to people by text message or WhatsApp. So if you look at what are the major things in here, it's about the bond. You know one another. The biggest thing that people talk about is we are like a family, and it's the pride and it's the tradition. There's something common to us, and we are, tied to our forefathers. It's a sense of belonging, hospitality. So this is what actually we resonate with when we think about Knanaya. So I just want us to be thinking about this every day and see that are we able to, our parents, are we able to pass that to our kids and these values, and so that they actually become as proud as we are, right? So then the question actually comes that who is a Knanaya, right? This has always been a question, and a lot of people have confusion. And I actually went through a thing, what is the simplest way I can explain who is a Knanaya? So first one, a person of a Knanaya father and a Knanaya mother. That's the only way a person becomes a Knanaya. There is no other way a person can become a Knanaya, right? That's the first thing. The second thing, it's only by birth. There's no other way. That's what makes it so special. Nobody else can become a Knanaya other than through birth. The third one, there is a unique identity. That identity is defined by our ethnicity. That's why it comes from a Knanaya father and a mother to their children, and then to their children. It's defined by ethnic identity. That's why we are called an ethnic community. The third one, we are a unique tribe. A tribe actually has a common heritage, common traditions, and common values. And we existed for centuries in a melting pot. If you think about India, have so many castes and religion and communities. In a country like that, we somehow kept an identity for centuries. And that's what the uniqueness of this, right? And the fifth one is, it can only exist if we have our own history, our own culture, and our own traditions. And that's what we have. And finally, what is our constitutive principle? And that principle is marrying within the community. The word constitutive actually means making a thing what it is. And it is absolutely essential for this community survival is marrying from within. And I cannot take credit for that phrase, constitutive principle. It was actually quoted by Father Kollavaram. He's actually no more. We were preparing a petition that he actually used that word constitutive principle. I've actually thought that it was absolutely a fabulous word, because we often talk about endogamy. Endogamy has so many positive and negative meanings depending upon who interpret it. But marrying from within as a constitutive principle of the Knanaya community is what makes the former 5 bullets survive. And if we don't marry from within, there is no person born of a Knanaya father and a mother. And there is no one actually can become a Knanaya by birth. And there is no identity because ethnicity is no longer defined. And then without that ethnicity, there is no tribal existence. And we don't have unique culture or traditions without that constitutive principle. So again, I just want you to be thinking about, and when you explain this, because there's a lot of misunderstanding among a lot of people, especially non-Knanayites, when we use the term endogamy, because endogamy means, that actual word means you actually mating within. So it could be a brother, it could be cousin. So there is a lot of misunderstanding of that word endogamy. So I just want you to be thinking about when you explain what is actually our history, our tradition, especially of marrying within the community. So how do others view us? Should we be worried about this? So this is a major reason why major question, because the reason I am bringing this, we actually as a community spend a lot of time trying to defend us or try to argue against people who may have a negative view of us. So I just put a few words that I heard over the years, including, so to some of my articles and presentations, other people have commented, especially, this is actually coming from non-Knanaya people. First one, Knanaya is like a cult. I think a lot of young people can probably relate to this because when they go and explain this in their school or to their friends about this unique community, they're marrying from within, others could comment as, oh, it's like a cult. Second one, it is not Christian or Catholic for Knanayites to be unique and married within. This is actually not something that actually a Christian or a Catholic. Third one, Knas still live in 4th century because we always talk about our ancestors and our migration and our history. And some people comment, recently when I was the interview for a online channel, one of the comments under can you mute? Okay. Knas live in 4th century, so we are very old school, right? And then others actually say the Knanaya is a myth, it's not real. And so oftentimes we don't know when somebody says that, how do we actually explain this? Because I actually some of the previous, historical writings on this, and I could find the earliest writing about us, written records, because we lost the copper plate, is 1301. But at least last 700 years, there is written record about Knanaya. So it's not a myth, it's actually real. Knanaya traditions are not unique. A lot of people actually today, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, try to emulate Knanaya traditions and claim those traditions as theirs, right? And we actually always criticize on WhatsApp and other places like that. Then some people say Knanaya traditions belongs to us too. The Valu Britam or the Puradana part. A lot of people now actually, especially non-Knanaya Sira Malabar, actually try to practice this in many of their weddings. And we often talk a lot about this, right? And then some people say Knanaya marriage is fun. I actually was in a flight one time traveling from Kochi to Bangalore. And there were 2 people sitting next to me. They were actually, somehow they got into a conversation about Knanaya. They both are from Trichur. And one person said, do you know about Knanaya? And the other person said, never heard of it. And he said that I actually been to a wedding of Knanaya, and they were actually talking about the day before the Mailanji deal. And he said, you've never seen such a fun wedding. So the people who actually doesn't know about us, when they encounter us in a particular situation, they actually see what we do and say there's a positive opinion right there. Then there is a Knanaya people are alcoholic. It's actually a common comment that we hear. And we, of course, we do consume alcohol, and that's part of our social life, but people describe us that way. Knanaya parties are great because I've actually had somebody told me recently that I love to come to Knanaya parties. In fact, actually one of the young adults told me that his friends say that they actually love to come to Knanaya homes for parties. So when you hear all of that, this is all what others say. So my question is, we should not be, or my comment is, we should not be worrying about what others think about us, because there is a reason for that. The reason is none of them have the experience of being a Knanaya. So just think about that. So that being a Knanaya, that feeling and that pride, that identity can only be claimed or experienced by those who are Knanaya. And those who are not Knanaya can never experience it. And they can never actually understand what connects us, what unites us. So my suggestion to every one of you, at least think about that. Instead of going wild on WhatsApp and other places and criticizing and challenging other people, my suggestion is ignore them. It is none of our business to go and correct them. It is none of our business. Because the more time we spend, that actually making us feel that we are less secure. We have an insecure feeling. That's what driving us to go against them. So there is a reason why I say that, because the time that we spend on those kinds of things actually stops us from spending time for things that matters in order to sustain this community for the future. So our energy and our knowledge and our money, if we can spare, and it should be spared for the betterment of our community and the survival of the community for a long time. Just ignore, and as I said, it is none of our business to worry about what others think about us. As long as they don't come and physically or otherwise hurt us, yes, then you have to defend. But other than that, just ignore them as much as we can. So then there are obviously a lot of challenges and opportunities that we have. There are challenges, but at the same time, we also have opportunities. And I just wanted to be blunt about that because we have to be honest about ourselves. We cannot hide behind a curtain and say there is nothing wrong with us, right? There are things that are wrong with us. So what are the challenges that we have? One, the politics of it. Because wherever there are 5 or 6 human beings come together, there is politics because people have different views, people have different thoughts, different approaches. But the problem that we have in our midst is, especially with the recent advent of social media, we actually use them in such a way that we demean our own brothers and sisters. So we can have an honest argument about something, but the moment we start with an argument, once we know that somebody doesn't agree with us, the next one is actually personally go after. And we find it so much happiness in doing that. But at the same time, when I would like you to think about all the messages, etc., that we leave on WhatsApp, what if our kids think about it, if they listen to it? So always consider that in the back of the background. It could be church politics. Church politics comes in several forms, right? Because there are Catholics, there are Orthodox Mennonites, there are even within Catholics, there's Malankara Catholics, there's Malabar Catholics. There are so many ways that church politics can evolve, but they're all good. The arguments are good. The idea sharing is good. But underneath that, we shouldn't undermine each other, because when we undermine each other, we no longer are proud about who we are. The second thing is association politics. We know that there are elections everywhere, and those elections actually often end up in a winner and a loser. And after that, it creates a lot of problems afterwards. Again, think about, we are not a political party. We are a unique community. We try to live or try to come to leadership in order to lead a community like ours. It's not something that we are going to have policy decisions in a country, right? And finally, family politics. That's because we actually know each other so much. That's why one of the middle schoolers said, no, there is no secret in the community. Because we know everyone, it actually comes naturally with the family politics. But every time when we do that, what we say at home reflects on the kids who actually grow at home. Always think about that. So the thing is, the other one is a destructive ego. Unfortunately, all Malayalis have it, and we are an extension of it, especially the population who grew up in India, or grew up in Kerala. So we have to be thinking about that. We must be willing to accept ideas, even if you don't agree with them. There is always this statement that agree to disagree is a gentleman thing, right? So you don't have to agree with everything, but at the same time, do not destroy each other based on ego. And finally, the other challenge that we have today, unlike 20, 30, 40 years ago, when we were all growing up within the circles of Kottayam or within the circles of Malabar, we are spread across 60 plus countries. It's a huge challenge. And we talk about it, and we do very little to bring everybody together. So the DKCC and other organizations working together is the only platform that we have in partnership with our religious leaders, because sometimes religious leadership is the most important component of bringing a community together, right? Then we have language barriers. Think about a person who grew up in Germany speak German than a person who grew up in America who speaks English. And even who somebody speaks English in America doesn't think people grew up in Britain or Australia speak English, right? So we actually, the differences that the common things that we had in the past is actually amplified by our differences today, because where we live and what we speak, and then finally the culture within which we live in. So for example, we have, there are people who migrated to Australia or into Europe or America, where we have multiple generations. Those who grew up, born here, those who came when they were 5 or 6, those who came here when they were teens. So everybody has a different culture and they think and act differently. So unless we, as in the leadership, as well as our young people, understand those differences and willing to go beyond that differences and say there is something that connects us together, and that is actually we are being a Knanaya, we will have a hard time sustaining this community in the future. So my suggestion is ignore them. We have to find a way to ignore them if we really want to be successful and thrive as a community. So then what are our opportunities? Why don't we focus on our opportunities, whether it is religious leadership, whether it is associations leadership, whatever the leadership is, if this community to survive, there are a few things we must do. Number one, to connect, right? So this is a great example of a connection where COVID made us come together at least on a Zoom meeting. We have to find a way to connect across the globe. Not only the adults actually naturally gravitate and connect, we have to connect young people. We actually talked a lot about, even in DKCC in the past, how do we do that? Can we bring all the leaders of youth leadership from all over the globe together to a location for a couple of days? Everybody has interest, but we don't know how to make it happen, how to accomplish this, and who will fund them, because somebody has to pay for their airfares. The kids cannot actually, probably a college kid cannot afford it. There are so many people who are wealthy enough, because none of us are taking our money when we go, right? If we can spare a little bit to contribute to a very effective process and operations by which we can connect our young people, then we can be successful. Because if we don't connect, what will happen is 50 families growing up, living in Germany, and their kids will be completely isolated from the rest of the Knanaya community. The same thing will happen where there is a large cloud, like in the US or Europe, or maybe in the Middle East, they have big connection to Kerala back, or in Australia. Beyond that, there isn't a huge population that actually can sustain it unless there is connections between us. So that is one of the most important things that we need to figure out as soon as possible, because in another 5 to 10 years, if we are failed to do that, this community's future is very bleak, right? Next one is creating networks. That's very important, right? We need to have educational network. We have professional network, because the reason is that a community like us can actually be seen as a value for the young people who are growing up. How do we create value unless the value in education through collaborations between different places? For example, today's world, barring COVID, a lot of kids actually looking for opportunities to study overseas, regardless of where they originate from. Can we host a student for a semester? Can we host a student for an internship for a summer? Can we open our homes for that? I had one experience back in '99. Actually, I opened my home for a summer intern, a Knanaya kid. That kid eventually married a Knanaya and settled in Australia now. But the relationship that established between my older son and that kid, she was in college at that time, was very interesting because of that 3 months that she spent at my home. Since then, unfortunately, I couldn't do this, but I just want us to think about, can we create some kind of an exchange program by which the cost of that experience of studying abroad is minimized by opening up our homes? It requires a very structured process to make it happen. A lot of other communities do it. It's not something unique. The other one is professional network. We started about 4 or 5 months ago in the LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a social platform for professionals. I created something called Knanaya Professional Network. And the reason I created was to see whether anyone will come and join. And over the course of last, 5-6 months, 250 people joined that professional network. And they are from all over the world because it's not restricted by geography. And actually 80% of them are young adults who actually grew up in different countries. And if you look at that, you'll be amazed actually the professional depth and the educational depth of our community. Oftentimes we do not realize, I couldn't believe we had about 15 lawyers in that group in different countries. We have doctors, we have engineers. So I think the advantage of taking, bringing up, and then what happened was in there, people started posting jobs in their respective companies so that others can apply. So I think we have to be proud to be supporting and helping find a job. And if we can hire another Knanaya, we should be absolutely proud to do that. And the reason I say this, yesterday, 2 days ago, my company CEO, he's an African American, he gave an interview. And, Merck is a huge company. He's one of the first big CEO of an African American CEO of a large company. So he was asked by a Harvard Business School professor, what do you want to be known as? And he openly stated that when I retire, when I go, I want to be known as a race man. That means I supported my community through the opportunities I got. So I think that is something, I think you might have seen in that earlier slide where college-going kids, when they said that, how do I get value out of being part of a community? Can we create that? If we can create that, we make a difference. Otherwise, no. And finally, I actually told you earlier, instilling pride, the traditions, and in the young people about those traditions. So those two are extremely important. If you don't do that, we will actually fail. And so that's what we should actually focus on. So what I wanted to tell you is, nobody else can help us. And the future of our community and future of our young people is in our own hands. And if we cannot do this, no, we cannot blame anybody. We cannot blame Syro Malabar. We cannot blame Rome. All of that is good if we actually get it done. But as a community, the only way we can survive is if we take a genuine interest in making it happen. So finally, I just want to leave you with a few ideals I think that we should strive for. The traditions including our rituals and our faith. That's part of our tradition. Second thing is unity. As we united, of course we have differences. I'm not living in a utopian world. We do have differences, but underneath all of that, we have to be united. And as I ask you to look around us, like the communities like Jewish and the Ishmaelis and Parsis, there is competition, there is difference of opinion, but when there is a common thing about the community, they are all together. And then the pride, we have to be proud about it in order to live and support something, and we should have that. And a sense of belonging. The reason why I say this, as we all grew up in a Knanaya environment around a Knanaya church, that is not the case for majority of our young people. They come to this, we migrated out. Majority of our people actually live in different places. They encounter different things. They all have to live in, I would always say in their own individual islands, because individuality is the norm by which the modern culture is actually happening. We cannot ignore that, right? But even in that, every human being, because we are a social animal, we always need a sense of belonging. And that's where this community can serve a huge role in making people belong to something. And actually our bishop talked about it before, that when you don't have that belonging, that's when despair and depression sets in, right? And finally, a reliability and dependability. What it is that I should be proud, or I should be thinking as a Knanaya that somebody else has, another Knanaya have my back, or I can depend on another Knanaya if I have a help. Again, Bishop mentioned that earlier, right? That we should not leave anyone behind, not only during COVID time, but any time. If we know somebody doesn't have a house, we can quickly do a fundraising, and if we say give out $10, $5, you can actually make it happen. So that's the dependability and reliability that we should be thinking about. Because if you don't exhibit these values, again, what are we passing on to our next generation? The AD 345 is not going to fly, guys. It is not going to fly because that is gone. That was 1700 years ago. We can talk about it, but that's not what make our community survive for the next 50 or 100 years. So we need to live and support these ideals. And that's where the petty politics of our community shouldn't be a hindrance to that. And I hope we all as leaders, and actually whether it is religious leaders or lay leaders, and you can actually start to think about it. And finally, I just wanted to give you a few examples of how we can know and grow, and connect and grow. The reason why I say that, oftentimes lack of knowledge is the problem, that we cannot communicate and educate our own kids that why or who we are really, right? So I found this particular, I don't know who maintains it, but this particular Wikipedia site, I thought it was actually pretty good about when they talk about the history of Knanaya. So seek out, there are a lot of books, there are a lot of references in this. They are not written by Knanaya people. Non-Knanaya people wrote about, what they have written about Knanaya. That is actually the most important one. The second, we have, I just chose KCC as an example, we should maintain websites of every association should have a website that actually talks about who they are and what the programs that they have, and we should continue to maintain, right? And the third one, recently, I'm so happy to see that KCCNA have inaugurated this Knanaya Youth Directory. Something is much needed in this community. So extend it, because it's actually coming as an app in one of the either Android or Apple phones. But the challenge in here is, I already told this to KCCNA leaders, as we as parents roll this out and cannot expect all the youth will sign up. We need influencers from their generation in order to make this work, because we need it. We need to have appropriate approval process so the Knanayites actually come in. So we should have something like that, because it can be extended. The technology has no borders. So we should consider, how do we do this, right? We need to come together. And finally, I just wanted to show you this Knanaya professional network. As you can see, 250 people. I strongly encourage, whether it is association leadership in any countries or religious, please ask people to sign up here, because it not only helps to understand and help each other, but also, as if somebody comes and looks at LinkedIn, you'll find that, as I said, 80% of them are actually unmarried young adults. So there is an opportunity for them to find who else is out there, right? That's very, very important. So use the technology as much as we can to connect and grow as a community, because it's so important, especially, there may be other classes in the future that talks about the careers, how students could actually select a major. All of this is a major problem. We always think a doctor, engineer, or a medical profession will actually the right thing to do. But in reality, no, there are a lot of other professions. There are a lot of other professionals who can guide them if you reach out. So use this as a mechanism to do it, right? So with that, I just try to say is, I hope there is enough elements to consider that we should be proud about Knanaya. There is nothing actually wrong with this community. There is actually, it's all about how we decide to carry this forward, and what we exemplify and what we externalize from our community defines who we are. So as I said, I am very proud. I've always been proud. And there was a time I doubted whether Knanaya makes sense when I was in graduate school. But that experience I mentioned in Kansas City turned me around. That I thought I don't want to miss that camaraderie that talk about being a Knanaya, right? So thank you very much.
Hello.